I always feel like we're right on that razor's edge between, kind of the demons of our greed and aggression and the angels of our better nature, our ability to understand, our ability to see the future and act on it, our ability to see each other and act on that empathetic connection. We have both of those things.
Hey everybody, Marianne Williamson here, and welcome to the podcast. We have a very, very special guest today, director and explorer James Cameron. I was pretty universally mocked and teased during my presidential campaign for tweets that I had written back when the Avatar movie first came out in 2009. I said that I thought that if Western civilization survives, it will be because enough people have seen and understood the Avatar movies. I said that if you really wanted to understand what's going on in America today, you would watch the Avatar movie because it gives you the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And actually, it's interesting because in preparing for my interview, watching it several more times, if anything, I'm even more enthused and even more convinced of the fundamental and powerful and relevant truth-telling of Avatar. The most sophisticated thinking there is, and nobody doubts the sophistication of the technological genius of Jim Cameron. Remember what this man has accomplished. He wrote and directed the Titanic and True Lies and The Abyss and Terminator movies, and even co-wrote one of the Rambo movies. So we all know he's an extraordinary director, and we all also know because of Titanic, because of Avatar, etc., we know the amazing technological genius and the fact that he has, I don't know if you know this, I did not know all of this before I began reading about him more. I knew that he was an explorer, but I didn't know that he had been by himself to the bottom of the ocean. He had gone almost 7 miles down by himself in 2012 in a submersive that he himself designed to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So his technological genius and exploratory skills are obviously well known, but the fact that he can, as he does in the movie Avatar, take what's happening in the world today, when you have this combination of governmental and corporate power that is a reiteration of so much of the history, not only of this country, but of many countries that have been imperialistic or colonial powers, and when they have interfaced with indigenous peoples, usually because the indigenous peoples have something that they want. They want the land, they want the minerals, they want the resources, which is called quite famously, of course, in Avatar, the unobtainium. And as has always been true throughout history and is still true today, the indigenous tribes are the ones who have the real gold, not only in the earth, the minerals, the resources, but in terms of their spiritual understanding of the connectedness of all life, the energy that flows through everything, and very, very specifically, as made so profoundly and gloriously obvious in Avatar, a connection to nature and a realization of its sacredness and its treasure that lies beyond what even the physical eyes can see. I can't imagine that you're one of those few people who haven't seen Avatar, but if you haven't, I hope that this interview will inspire you to make sure that you do. If you can, try to see it in a theater where there's 3D, although with COVID, I don't know how you could do that. Either way, any way you can see Avatar. If you can only see it on a flat screen now, by all means do. But when this COVID era has passed, make sure you see it in 3D if you haven't yet. This is very great honor to me to be able to visit with Jim Cameron for this interview, and I hope that you enjoy it greatly. After the interview, please hang around, and I will be taking a couple of questions. You can write to me at marianne@castmedia.com. Let's do this thing. Jim Cameron. Here we go. Jim Cameron, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast with me. It's just an honor to have a chance to talk to you.
Well, it's absolutely a pleasure to be invited on your show or podcast or whatever we call it. I guess it's a show these days, right?
whatever it is. As you know, it's content that matters, not form. If
Right.
anybody has made that clear, it's you.
Yeah.
So, Albert Camus said that fiction is where it's the lie, where we get to tell the truth. And the thing that so fascinates me about Avatar is that with this fantastical world that you've created, you tell such very profound truths. And I'm very excited to have an opportunity to talk to you about that. If it's okay, I want to ask you something even before we get into the movie itself. One of the things that fascinates me about you is that you're from Canada. It fascinates me that your childhood was spent there in the forests there. And so I'm interested, you've talked before about how transformative your childhood experiences were, particularly in terms of your connection with the forest and what you bring to us, of course, on Pandora and the forest there. Do you think, I mean, obviously we have great forests in the United States as well. Do you feel that if you had been brought up here in the United States, it would have been the same thing for you? And do you feel, I know you're a Canadian citizen now, it interests me because you seem to have just enough distance from the imperialism, from the colonialism, from the economic insanity. There seems to be that just enough distance to be able to speak more truthfully into it. Is there something there about your being Canadian?
Very probably. I wouldn't want to overplay it because, I mean, Canada is subject to all of those factors as well. And they've had various, governments there that have been, more involved in sort of the rape of the land, if you will, and our current, government there is less so, which is good. And it goes back and forth. The pendulum swings in the States. It swings here in New Zealand, where I am now. It swings in Canada. I think, the child is the father of the man, and so I'm very much the product of my early experiences, which were a combination of being Canadian, being rural, and having an inquisitive mind and wanting to spend time in nature, which was also possibly a function of its time. Had I been the same person now at that age in that same environment, might I have spent my childhood in video games and not gone out into the woods? So, our time, our specific time on the planet, I think, makes a difference. I think Canadians tend to be a little more, there's the joke about Canadians being polite. But I think it comes from them being a generation closer to a rural environment, being a little bit more on a frontier, being a little bit harsher environment. People have to pull together a little bit more. There's maybe a little more sense of community there. So, yeah, Canadians are polite. I'm always saying I'm sorry to people,
Well, it didn't seem to me so much just even polite as just a perspective on what's happening in the United States.
Yeah.
But like you said, you see it everywhere. But the United States so embodies it in such a way, and you were so out there with the truth telling about it. You were just talking about children being in the forest, children being with nature, and obviously your connection to nature goes not only the land, but also the ocean, also outer space. And yet at the same time, and this is what makes you so phenomenally you, is you have this master of both worlds thing going on, where you have this, in fact, it's three worlds, because not only do you have this profound connection to nature that you can take us right into, you're a portal right into it, then this profound capacity technologically, and the genius of the exploration. It's so interesting because when you watch the videos of the teams you worked with for the submersive into the bottom of the ocean, it's very similar to the team of geniuses that you're working with to make Avatar, right?
Well, it turns out, you need the same kind of inquisitive people that think outside the box to do exploration and to do innovation. They're very similar sort of mental processes for people. First of all, you can't do it yourself, so you're going to be part of a team. How do you lead a team? How do you inspire a team? What is the storytelling that you create around what you're doing and what you're attempting to do together? What are the challenges? How do you overcome those challenges? How do you deal with the defeats that inevitably come along, or I should say, the setbacks? And it's very similar when you're at the cutting edge of image creation, like we were for Avatar, for example, or creating a brand new robotic or submersible vehicle to go into the deep ocean. I find it attracts the same type of people that are curious, that are kind of self-motivating, that don't mind kind of long hours because they have a sense of mission or a sense of goal.
Well, what you just said is very obvious when you're watching a video about the making of Avatar, and then you watch a video about the putting together the team for the Submersive. The big difference, of course, is that if you get it wrong with a movie, you just got it wrong with a movie. You get it wrong with deep sea exploration, somebody dies, namely yourself.
Yeah, there's no second take.
No second take. So there's that element of risk. And really, when you're talking about any kind of exploration, whether you're talking about exploring in outer space, exploring in the ocean, or even exploring in the natural world of the Earth, for the explorer, there is always that element of danger, isn't there? Always that element of risk. Well, I think it's interesting, your not only exquisite understanding of all those things, but then your exquisite ability to take us there. But I think that the danger that you experienced, the risk of real danger that you experienced with your deep sea exploration is an important element of Avatar. Because what comes across very clearly is we are in danger.
Yes.
A great evil has come upon us.
Yes, right.
And I think if Avatar didn't have that element to it, it wouldn't be the powerful piece of truth-telling that it is.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
When you have, of course, you probably know, Jim, I have been rather universally teased about my tweets
Yes.
about Avatar.
Yeah.
And I have said, and when I was preparing for this interview, watching it again, reading even more, my enthusiasm has only grown, and my respect and admiration has only grown, and my recognition of its relevance has only grown. So I have been long a person who would... Thank you. I've long been a person who would quote Jefferson, Jesus, Martin Luther King. I don't care who's saying it.
Right.
But when Eteria's mother says, "We will see whether your insanity can be cured."
Yes.
That's what I'm always curious about with you, because I don't think that there's any person in public life that so clearly understands, number one, the technological genius that can be employed. It seems to me that with what you have achieved, you're demonstrating we have the genius. We could do this. We could save the planet. So on one hand, you're dealing with this profound sense of what's possible, but also you are dealing with and revealing to us and communicating to us the profound sense of danger if we don't get it right.
Well, I'm torn on a daily basis. I think we sit at this equipoise between, the angels of our better nature, which includes our consciousness and our ability, not just our ability to emote and relate to each other and be empathetic, but our ability to create these things, to have this technical civilization, to have a higher understanding of the universe around us, to do astrophysics, to do planetary science, to do the biological sciences and genetics and so on, all the things that we're understanding that were never understood. For 99% of the human experience on Earth, we now understand things we never understood before. It hasn't made us better in terms of our interactions with each other. One could argue we're even going in the wrong direction compared to, let's say, so-called primitive man. Indigenous peoples innately have a cooperative spirit and an empathetic relationship with each other that I think far surpasses what we have. So, I always feel like we're right on that razor's edge between, kind of the demons of our greed and aggression and the angels of our better nature, our ability to understand, our ability to see the future and act on it, our ability to see each other and act on that empathetic connection. We have both of those things, and it's always been a war. I mean, I read a very good book recently, maybe you've read it, called Humankind. It's by a Dutch author named Rutger Bregman, I believe. And if you haven't read it, you absolutely should. And I think I've heard of it. It deals with that exact subject. And there's been the sort of the Hobbesian view that we were savages, that we were uncivilized, that we lived these brutish, short lives, and then we became civilized. And then we had these kind of patriarchal, top-down, law and order imposed structures that kept people from being the savage beings that they are, and that allowed us to progress. Then there's the Rousseauian vision, the so-called noble savage, which has been dismissed as naive, but turns out with anthropology and sociological research to be the more true, which is indigenous peoples. They don't have patriarchal top-down leaderships. They have innate communities of cooperative people, and this was our big sort of number one with a bullet killer app that allowed us to survive and to populate the entire planet, was our ability to cooperate. So it turns out that the Rousseauian kind of noble savage, so-called naive view that's been dismissed for most of the post-Enlightenment and industrial era and up to the present, turns out to be the more true version of us. And that gives me a great deal of hope.
Not only a more true version, but a more sophisticated version.
Yes.
It's so interesting when Parker Selfridge talks about them as savages. And we realize that we're the savages.
That's right.
We are the savages. As the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we're technological geniuses, but ethical infants.
Yes.
And we're more like infants who are playing with razor blades.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of Avatar, I think that the greatest level of sophistication is when you can bring very sophisticated information into simple form. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes Avatar, that you could tell that level of sophisticated truth in almost like a cartoon, which is what religion and spirituality is. And there are religious and spiritual themes throughout.
Absolutely. And they're there by design. They're not accidental. I mean, the film, I think, was dismissed by some critics as being too simplistic, too familiar a story, just a sort of Pocahontas story, and so on. And I don't think they realized that it was by design a kind of Trojan horse to allow you to deal with a very familiar and simple plot line that has these other layers and textures to it, which was my focus. My focus was on the design, the fabric of the world, the feeling evoked by the watching, so you can synthesize the plot or sum up the plot quite quickly, but you can't sum up the experience quickly. And so it was experiential filmmaking. That was the primary goal.
Well, it's a portal. And you enter it on whatever level you enter it, which is, once again, what to me makes your mind so fascinating, because it's like, I see this, you see that, and it's all 360 degrees. It's all there. In terms of the spiritual themes, first there is, and before we leave the idea of how the quote unquote savages are the sophisticated ones, one of the things that is so deep for me about the relationship of the Na'vi to the land is when Grace Augustine keeps talking about everything that's going on there. Not only is it beautiful, not only is it bioluminescent, not only, like you said, you can enter it on the level of the beauty, but when she talks about all the connectivity and the connectivity that actually, it is greater even than the human brain.
Right.
And the connectivity of the people to the earth, the connectivity of the people to each other, that they see into each other.
Yeah.
Even at the end, in Egyptian mythology, Isis has to go down when Osiris, she goes down into the underworld with him. So when the last scene is that she actually goes into the underworld and she brings him back up.
Yeah.
So so it's almost like all the Christian mythology is there, the Buddhist principles are there. Then you come up with the Egyptian mythology. So I don't know. I mean, I know that you could not have done this without a conscious understanding of many of these principles. But in terms of the ecumenicism of it and the universality of these principles, I thought was amazing.
Well, I do think, certainly you've got, certain kind of Messiah myths that go through and Osiris, death and redemption and resurrection and all that sort of thing. But I think I was consciously referencing the sort of pre-Christian pagan mystery religions that are more goddess-based and more kind of holistic and nature-worshipping, and less sort of patriarchal than that which came subsequently.
Deeply received, not only to Terry, but also her mother, who is the shaman. Clearly we got that. It seems to be not only in Avatar, but throughout your movies. On one hand, you have, once again, a deep appreciation of what trouble we're in. But whenever you present any kind of Messiah suggestion, you seem to have a lot of faith in the regular guy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's
That
critical.
Sully was not the scientist. Could you please talk about that?
Well, I think, I was kind of I was getting to do both in that film in a way that I don't normally. Like, for example, in The Abyss, they meet an alien advanced civilization, and it's the everyman, the oil rig worker, sort of a natural alpha character, but basically an everyman, blue collar guy that speaks for humanity and basically saves us all. So that was a theme for me, and it was the regular kind of ground pounder grunts in Aliens, and it was a waitress in Terminator. I like that kind of everyday perspective. I come from a kind of blue collar background, not a background of academia. I mean, I've read voraciously, so it's not like I'm
Clearly.
ignorant, but I think
Yeah,
that
we know.
I think it's important in films to have a respect for the plight of the average person and how they navigate through life. But I also wanted to celebrate science, and I created a scientist in that film, in Avatar, who's an admirable person, who's not what you think of as a typical movie scientist. Movie scientists are either kind of nerds that chatter for 10 seconds and tell you the thing you need to know while the main characters go on and actually deal with the problem. So they're sort of set aside as not non-action figures, if you will. Or they're evil and they're the source of all evil in the world and that sort of thing. So the evil scientist, the cloistered scientist, the out-of-touch scientist, I wanted to get rid of all those myths and make an aspirational scientist, somebody who was cool, somebody that you could imagine yourself wanting to be, who had wisdom as well as knowledge, who admitted what she didn't know. In fact, Sigourney's character says at one point, okay, with the great childlike excitement, and almost a glow, almost a radiance in her face, she says, okay, what we think we know is, and then she says, she doesn't stand there declaratively like a lecturer and say, this is what science can tell you if you just listen. I wanted her to evoke that sense of, well, we don't have all the answers, but it's so exciting to find out.
Well, you did name her Grace Augustine.
Yeah,
so
right.
There was a hint there.
Yeah.
There was a hint there that these institutional realities could have ethics.
Yes.
And that's important because this great evil is upon us.
Yes.
You definitely are talking about corporatism. You're talking about imperialism. You're talking about the great danger and the great evil of corporate power mixed with military.
Yes,
when Jake
exactly.
says, they used to be fighting for freedom and now they're just grunts, right? They're working for the man, for the company, for the money.
Yep.
And so we don't see corporate power with ethics. We don't see military with ethics. So it's important that there's a character there that I believe it does give us some hope that those forces, business forces with ethics, would be a whole different thing.
That's exactly right.
Government with ethics would be a whole different thing.
What a concept.
So
somebody should try it sometime.
Well, you try it. And that goes back to what is so upsetting about this moment. Because going back to this, you're putting together that team of geniuses. That's what democracy should be.
Yeah, exactly.
We should all be working.
We should rely on and respect each other and be a team. Now, it's interesting, that happens here, where I am right now, physically, in New Zealand. They call it the team of 5 million. It's a small country. It has big divisive forces. You've got an original indigenous population that now represents, I think, a quarter or a fifth of the entire population, the Maori people. They have a very different perspective. Everybody gets along for the most part here pretty well. They believe in electing the right government and supporting that government, and that government has been very effective in managing the COVID crisis to the extent that there's no virus in the country at all right now. And so that accomplishment it's not a top-down system. It's a system of everybody cooperating and working together. The government edicts only work if everybody follows them. But if you laugh at them and say, oh, you're infringing on my rights, my basic freedoms, that your freedom to let other people die or to be the cause of other people's death. I'm so appalled by what's happening in the U.S. and what's happened over the last year. I can't even express it. Not not the political landscape, that's been a shit show for years, but just seeing people not able to pull together for the common good, and being in a place where I got to witness that. I know it's possible for humans to do it. Even English-speaking people who come from a Western civilization matrix can do it. It's just that apparently Americans cannot do it. And maybe I'm speaking as a Canadian, but I have lived there for 47 years in the U.S., and I've seen it up close and personal. And there are many, many, many admirable things about what makes people kind of that American spirit and the goal to have a truly representative democracy and all that. But man, they sure can't pull it together in a crisis.
I think there have been times in our past when we have done it, not exclusively, not universally in terms of all of our functioning, but there have certainly been pieces of it. And I think the great evil that first came upon us in terms of the combination of military and governmental
Yes.
And business power, this really began a full assault 40 years ago.
Sure, sure.
And
look, I mean, you talk about my childhood in Canada, and while Canada's a factor, I think the temper of the times was also a factor. You know, I was 14 in 1968 at the peak of the first big wave of the civil rights movement, and a couple of years before the first Earth Day, the eco-crisis that was identified at the time. So it was an incredibly hopeful time of exploration, going to the moon, going deep into the ocean. It was also a time where you were in the Vietnam War, you had the Cold War, you had the threat of nuclear annihilation, you had these social movements, people were unplugging. It seemed very anarchistic at times. There was a youth movement that was highly anarchistic by design, that was challenging institutions, that was marching in the streets, throwing the tear gas back at the police. All of those things for the first time, I think, in American history at that scale. So it was a very turbulent time. It was a time when people were really rallying around principles, you know, of anti-war and equal rights and feminism and all that. So I'm a product of all that, and I'm still a product of all that today, because those battles are not won yet. You know, we've made some progress, but we haven't won them.
I'm a couple of years older than you, so I
No.
come from the exact same. No, I am. We're the exact same. I'm born in 52. You were born in 54, I believe, right?
Yeah, wow.
So you and I are keepers of the story. And I think what you just said is so important. And I feel it's so important when I talk to younger people, and I can tell them, it wasn't always like this. That's not to romanticize the past, to romanticize American capitalism before, not to romanticize. I mean, obviously we had terrible problems, and you know, it's not like racism wasn't there, homophobia, anti-Semitism, et cetera. But there was a social consensus we were supposed to try to be good.
Yes.
That's what seems to me most different. And of course, when you say all the battles haven't been won, I think what you're making very clear with Avatar and other things you've said and written, where not only have not all the social battles been won, we're actually moving backwards.
In some ways we are, absolutely. I think when I was growing up, people still trusted science. You know, they believed what the scientists said. Scientists were vilified for creating nuclear weapons, but people still believed in this idea of progress, and that science and technology worked together, and that we were going to have new cures for diseases, and that what science did was good for us. And I don't think people questioned it a great deal. I don't think they really thought of science as a method, like the scientific method, a way of a philosophy, if you will, of understanding the world. But lately, you know, in the last 10 years, science has been politicized to the point where we we pick and choose the scientific sort of facts or principles that we want that fit our pre-existing worldview. And that's not how science works at all. You can't fit it into a capitalist frame. So we're definitely going back into a kind of magical thinking that's not good. I mean, I love spirituality. I love the principles of spirituality and the feelings and the ideas and the philosophies. But when it steps over a line into applying magical thinking to real world problems about where science is the true arbiter of truth, if you want to call it that, then I have a problem.
Well, I don't think real spirituality does promote magical thinking and does step over a line. And what corrupted science was not spirituality. What
No.
corrupted science was Parker Selfridge. What
Exactly.
corrupted science
Exactly.
was unfettered capitalism. What corrupted
Exactly.
science was, much as you're
Exactly.
saying, it
And
depends on
government.
who's paying for the scientists. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't have government today paying for objective science
No.
like they used to. We used to believe in government patronizing the arts, patronizing science, and
That's
today
right.
it's which science are you talking about? The science that was paid for by Big Pharma or the science that wasn't paid for by Big Pharma? Are you
Yeah.
talking about the science that was paid for by big agriculture or the science
Yeah.
that wasn't paid for by big agriculture? Let's not
Exactly.
blame spirituality for that.
No,
That's
no,
a
no.
disconnect.
I'm not.
I know.
I'm not.
I just got to
I'm not.
make it clear here.
Okay, no, you're right on
We
to
didn't
it. And-
drop. Yeah.
no, you're absolutely correct, and you've said it beautifully and very succinctly. But to me, one of the biggest problems that we're facing right now is that the average person is stepping back from a belief in science. And I don't think people, by the way, should believe in science. They should believe in the methodology of science, because that methodology has got checks and balances built into it. Scientists peer review each other. They're very contentious, and it's a way for truth to emerge. But you're right. You have to follow the money, and you have to see who's paying for the science and publishing the results, and who's paying for the meta-analysis of the science to see what the overall consensus is.
And one of the things that I'm sure I have seen, I can imagine that you've seen it many more times than I have, is the sadness of scientists who are working on things that they do not feel promote the good of the world. And
Right.
it is a sadness because they would much rather have received a grant from government or somewhere else, some other institution that would enable them to do experimentation, to do scientific discovery on things that would actually have to do with making the world a better place. But as you
Yeah.
well know, what would make the world a better place, discovery for that may or may not make short-term corporate profits, which is why it's so exciting that someone like you has made the kind of financial advantage that you can afford to explore because you want to explore. Now, so I have a couple things I want to ask you about.
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, you were talking about people's disconnection from science, but it seems to me, and I'm sure that you agree, I mean, obviously you made Avatar, it's not just our disconnection from science, it's also our disconnection from the spirituality of the indigenous peoples.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
isn't the
Yeah.
marriage of those two things what you present to the world so
Absolutely.
profoundly in this movie?
Yeah. Well, look, I guess I'm saying that we've lost our connection to nature. The beauty of the indigenous worldview, and of course, you can't make gross generalizations about all these different indigenous cultures, but a few generalizations do apply. And one of them is they tend not to see nature as separate from themselves. And in some cases, they don't even have a word in their language for nature in the sense that we do, that nature is something else, somewhere else, or something that you go visit. But they don't have a word for nature the way we have a word for nature. Oh, I'm going to go be in nature, as opposed to an urban environment, a non-natural environment. They don't even have that concept for the most part. So they see themselves as playing a role in a big, rich tapestry of life, and they're part of the natural cycles and so on. And of course, they create a lot of creation myth stuff around that as well, so that they understand their place in the world. But basically, they respect as brothers and sisters the other animals and co-inhabitants of the planet, and we don't. Dolphins, whales, bonobos, other intelligent sentient animals, we're just sort of either slaughtering them or allowing them to die through neglect, pretty much as quickly as possible as human civilization steamrolls into a nature-free future.
With profound irreverence and lack of devotion.
Yeah.
I heard you on one interview talking about nature deficit disorder.
Yeah.
So what you're saying and what we see in Avatar so magnificently with the Amatakaya is that they see into each other and they see into nature.
Yeah.
But then the third aspect, of course, is their spirituality, is
Yes.
the tree of souls, where
Yeah.
prayers come to be, prayers are said, and prayers are sometimes heard. So
Right.
it seems to me that holds, it's more than just a creation myth. It's a connection to the sky. They have connection to earth, they have connection to each other, and they have connection to spirit. Which takes me to a question. I was thinking about you when the Mars Rover landed.
Uh-huh.
because I can only imagine where you go. So on one hand, we have the rover landing, and on the other hand, we have the Space Force.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Well, look, to me, the rover is an extension of our human consciousness. It's a celebration of our will to explore, to understand better, to understand the natural world, to understand other planets. We have that will to understand our own planet, but it doesn't get the headlines that a Mars rover does. And I've been involved in space projects and continue to be involved. I even have a very loose connection to this particular rover because I was on the team that designed the lenses on the Mastcam camera that were supposed to go on the previous rover, the MSL, which was called Curiosity. They didn't fly because the mission got de-scoped, but now that same lens design is flying, and so our camera that I actually worked on is actually taking pictures on Mars right now. So I'm very excited about that. So I love robotics and their ability to go places we can't physically transport ourselves yet. But again, you talk about the same applications of that technology to the military. That's where it gets into a lot of big ethical issues, obviously. And the military is only as good or bad as the people commanding it. Is ultimately
well,
the
that's
truth.
of course it's it like as in the movie, you have Grace Augustine. She's the consciousness of an ethical scientist, whereas
Yes.
you have the consciousness of the business person. So this idea of the Space Force, of course, is the weaponization of space.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when you look at the duality between the Mars rover and the excitement we all felt, and watching all those, so many of them were so young, or at least compared to us, the scientists who made it all happen. And it's so wonderful, and it's such an example. And then you know about the Space Force and what's really going on and the weaponization, and you wonder if the military has put any of its own testing on the rover and what it's finding out. And this goes back to the great evil upon us. And the urgency of this moment. And I think the urgency of this moment is part of what was so, to me, obvious in Avatar.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
To that?
You can say anything.
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I see us at a kind of a real crossroads. You talk about the fight for the soul of America and all that. I think we're at a point where we understand enough about ourselves as a species. We understand the sort of biological deterministic forces that kind of drive us to do the things that we do. And I think we're at a crossroads where we have to choose whether to be takers or caretakers, right? So that the takers are the kind of Western and industrial revolution, capitalist, everything serves a purpose. It's all market driven, winner take all, loser take the hindmost, all those sort of market-based philosophies, which all represent that kind of Hobbesian, aggressive, competitive view of humanity. And I think there's a sort of a little bit more male energy than there is female. And then on the caretaker side, you've got the indigenous people, you've got environmental scientists and people who respond to environmentalism and become active in that, who want to try to preserve, who appreciate the beauty and complexity of nature and want to understand it before we destroy it, and dedicate their lives to making the planet livable for everybody, including its non-intelligent inhabitants and all of us. And I realized that what divides us into those two camps is love and empathy. Not that love and empathy resides entirely on the caretaker side, but that love and empathy manifests itself in two different ways in different people and in different sort of cultures. And you can see it between the red states and the blue states. On the one hand, love and empathy for those immediately around you, your family, your children, you love them, you love your friends, you love the people right around you, becomes your driver. And you take a very aggressive stance, which can be militaristic, it can be capitalistic, it can be, I'm going to do everything to protect the people that I love against all those others out there. Versus a love and empathy that transcends that tightly drawn spotlight and becomes an empathy for everyone who's human, puts us all in the same club, puts us all in the same team. And that's the mental paradigm that I think we've got to adopt in order to survive, because we can only solve these problems thinking of ourselves as the team of 7 billion. And I'm stealing from the motto here in New Zealand, the team of 5 million. Why can't it be the team of 7 billion? Why do we have to draw these insular perimeters around ourselves and just keep all the love focused here and turn it into hate for everybody outside that circle?
Well, it's like you said, if you only think of you as your isolated self, you don't recognize how much of you is out there. Right. But when you have what you were talking about with the Na'vi and with the indigenous people, a realization that you extend beyond your body to the larger sense of self, then you realize that the love that will save the world is not just a personal love. The love that will save the world can't just be love for your own children. It has to be love also for the children on the other side of town. And it can't be love just for your own home. It has to be a realization that Earth is home. And this is where the feminine comes in. You know, my mother would say it's a woman's job to take care of her children, to take care of her home. Now, I grew up at a time where, you know, the feminism of my time was the idea that my mother wasn't sophisticated enough. And I realize now she's right. It's just we have to see every child as our children. We have to see the Earth itself as our home, which goes back to New Zealand. You know, when I was running, in addition to being teased so much for my avatar tweets, I was also teased for saying that Jacinda Ardern would be my first phone call. And the reason I said that was because I had read where she had said that she wanted New Zealand to be the country where it was the best place in the world for a child to grow up.
Yeah.
That's the kind of consciousness in government that we need, obviously, correct?
Yeah, that's why I brought my kids here. You know, we just looked around at the horror show that was taking place in the U.S., and we'd been hoping to move to New Zealand for many years, and we had established a farm here and so on, but we were still spending the majority of our time in the United States, and my wife and I just looked at each other and said, where would you rather be? Where would you rather be raising your kids right now? And we moved here. So I don't want everybody in the world to move to New Zealand. I think the important thing
I
is
want to ask you about that.
Take the principles and spread them, you know.
Yeah, well, since you brought it up, I want to ask about that. I actually had not realized until you just said it that you had permanently moved. I thought you were just there for the Avatar films. But since you're saying that, the word on the street here, not about you, by all means, a lot of the neocons, a lot of the people who have been the most responsible for the Parker Selfridge ethos, the most responsible for the actually fascist combination of corporate and governmental power, have bought land in New Zealand. So that if everything falls apart, as they have almost guaranteed it will, they can escape to New Zealand? Hello?
Well, it's the myth. Look, I've spent a lot of time over the last few years trying to think of what are the CEOs of these major corporations thinking. They're not stupid people. They didn't get where they are by being dumb and by being uninformed. They know exactly what they're doing. And I believe it goes like this. If I take Shell or ExxonMobil or whatever, and I try to divert its course toward, let's say, renewable energy by spreading the portfolio and investing in that, as opposed to doubling down on extraction of fossil fuels, which is hastening the end of civilization as we know it. If I do that, I'll get replaced very quickly because the corporation...
That's what they always say to me.
The corporation has its own life. And we have to understand that we now exist in a world that has a new pantheon of gods, not the old, pantheon of multiple gods and demigods that they had in Greece and in India and so on, but a new pantheon of gods that are these superorganisms of corporations, which have legal status as an entity, as a legal entity. And they may not be any more sophisticated in terms of their intelligence overall than an amoeba, meaning an amoeba doesn't know the greater world around it, but it will feed, it will absorb others, it will compete, it will do the things it needs to do to survive. And that's what's happening right now. And the people who speak, who represent these companies that are the CEOs and so on, they are only the brain cells of a vast organism that has its own drive to survive. And these corporations, these superorganisms competing with each other, have completely taken over the planet. They influence government to get it to turn out their way, the way they want it to turn out, because that's what they need to do. In the same way that microorganisms will emit enzymes to get the organisms around them to do what they want them to do, either move away or spoof a cell so they can absorb it or whatever it is. And that's the world that we're living in right now. So it's pointless to blame that individual. We have to blame the entire system, and the only solution is for us as individual people, not representatives of corporations, to work together, to band together, and to will it to be different. And I don't know quite how you do that.
The situation that you just described is cancer.
Exactly.
When one cell completely disconnects from any sense that it has a collaborative function.
That's
so
correct.
A cell in the body collaborates with other cells to serve
right.
the highest functioning of the organ and the organism of which it's part.
Yeah.
So when it disconnects from that natural intelligence,
Yes.
highest intelligence is a collaborative intelligence.
Right.
When it disconnects and goes off to do its own thing and builds its own kingdom with other cells that are similarly disconnected, that's
right.
called a tumor. The fact that we call it a huge corporation doesn't mean it's not a tumor. It's a malignant tumor on the body politic. Now, I'm not sure I totally agree with you, Jim, and I certainly have heard the CEOs have said it to me too. Marianne, if I did what you're saying, I would be fired. And the person who replaced me would even be worse. But isn't that the same argument as these awful politicians who are voting so terribly and are saying, I have to do this or I'll lose my job? Isn't there a level on which the answer is, then lose your job?
Exactly.
Then lose your job?
Exactly. But it goes back to what I was saying about love and empathy being either a broad field or a narrow spotlight. That CEO doesn't want to lose his job because he or she knows that the way to best protect his or her children and the people that they immediately love is to continue to be rich because of that thing you were talking about, which is the lifeboat mentality. I know, I'm speaking now as this hypothetical CEO. I know one thing. I may be hastening the end, but if I step out of the way, someone else will do it for me and probably faster. So the best thing for me to do for the people that I love and feel a sense of duty and purpose as a man or a woman too, is to protect them by continuing to get rich. Because the one thing I know is when the shit hits the fan, the rich do better than everybody else. And that's got to be what they're thinking. But I've made an observation, having studied Titanic for now 26 or 27 years. The two richest people in America died on that ship. So if you contribute to the end, you will suffer the end with everyone else, and your children will suffer that end as well. So that mentality is too short-sighted. It's not what did you call it? It's not the more sophisticated. It's not the higher level thinking. It's tumor thinking.
It's malignant.
It's tumor
malignant,
thinking.
and it's malignant thinking, and the malignant cell dies as well. When the cancer kills the body, the malignant cell dies as well. There is no amount of money, and you of all people know this. Hello, everybody knows about the extraordinary financial success of your films, and we also know what you've dedicated your life to. So you and others are examples of people who have amassed great wealth and yet clearly have perspective and use their wealth in ways that demonstrate that perspective. There is ultimately no amount of money that any person could make that can wall themselves off from the shit that's going to hit the fan if this stuff does not stop.
Exactly.
I've been saying, and so it's interesting to hear you speak because you're a little more charitable. If you have the CEO of Exxon, who is poisoning a whole section of the Amazon, poisoning the indigenous peoples there, not even applying the minimum environmental standards that would be applied here for oil drilling. And you're saying, well, he just is trying to make enough money. To you of all people, you clearly know at a certain point it's enough.
But I'm trying to understand. We can't fight something we don't understand. And we have this tendency, yes, you can dismiss them all, as we did in the 60s, as just a bunch of greedy bastards, right? But it's not that simple, because you've got to get into the psychology of how they justify shaving that face in the mirror in the morning and going to work and doing the things that they know are wrong. If we don't understand that cognitive process will never be able to circumvent or interrupt it. Look, there are psychopaths in the world who have no sense of conscience toward others. In fact, they don't even see others as people. They're just sort of props in a stage play that's about them. And Trump is clearly one of them. And it turns out that degree of psychopathy is about 1% of the general populace. And I'm not saying 1% of the populace are psychopathic killers. They're just people with no empathy and no conscience and no compassion. And they function that way, right? So it turns out that by applying the same metrics, you find out that they're 1 in 10 amongst the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. So a 10x multiple of the normal distribution of psychopathy is concentrated in the highest levels of corporate power because it's a system that rewards lack of conscience. It's a system that rewards the guy the person, female or male, who can make the hard decisions, who can lay off 40,000 people to save the next quarter or to save the company. That's the person you want. So it rewards a kind of personality and a kind of psychological perspective that causes a 10x concentration of psychopathy in the higher ranks of these boardrooms. So yes, there's that happening as well, and I have no mercy or compassion for that person, but they're still not the majority. They're still only 10%.
They don't have to be the majority. They don't have to be the majority in number. And I certainly agree with you. Not every wealthy person is a greedy bastard. I've spent most of my adult life in New York and Los Angeles. I've known some extremely wealthy people, and no socioeconomic group has a monopoly on values. I totally understand what you're saying. However, we have adopted a sociopathic economic paradigm.
Correct.
And I think we have to face this clearly. Anybody who watches Avatar, clearly you know. And one of the things Jake Sully says, they will not stop. The Colonel says, these people need to know we will not stop.
That's right.
Just like a cancer cell, it is progressive. And inertia means the tendency of the object to move in whatever direction it's moving in, unless there is the introduction of a counterforce.
Right.
And one of the things that I read that you said once is I just hope that this can change something a little.
Yeah.
Can change something a little. And I think when you talk about the change in consciousness that a movie like Avatar presents, it seems to me what you are building, what you are contributing to, is enough of a constituency, is enough of a socially responsible investment base.
Exactly.
Enough people who don't want the CEO. They don't want to feel that their money is blood money. But I have to tell you something, in my experience.
But it didn't work. It didn't work. Not that any film can do anything on its own. It has to be a kind of slow evolution of the zeitgeist.
Well, but let's talk about that. We don't have a lot of time.
That's the
I think
problem.
that first of all, I think don't underestimate what Avatar has done. I stand by my tweets. I stand by my tweets.
Thank you.
Okay, I stand by my tweets, and also look at the profound success of the movie around the world. I think there is an aspirational knowing. There is a yearning of the human race. You know, our behavioral patterns, as you are well aware, are so maladaptive for the survival of our species.
Yes.
I think there is a naive arrogance, though. Mm-hmm. I think we need to look at history and realize many advanced cultures, or at least advanced for their time, crashed and burned. There is no guarantee that ours will not crash and burn. And that's what makes, going back to where we began, what you experience, what you demonstrate, working with these geniuses. When you think of the geniuses who designed Avatar, when you think of the geniuses who built your scientific team, that will all go down. If we let this thing die, it will all go down. I think the only, it's interesting though, because when you talk about these CEOs, I don't meet these billionaires who feel they need more money. That's not what, they're not stupid, like you were saying. It's not like I've heard enough of them say what number at which my lifestyle couldn't change no matter how much I made. It's something beyond more money. You tell me what makes Jeff Bezos unwilling to let those people unionize. It's more than just wanting money. It's something else is going on, and it is a sociopathology. And
I don't know, Jeff. I don't know, Jeff, so I can't answer that question. But I do think that there's a competitive spirit in people that do rise to the top in the corporate world, and they continue to have that competitive spirit, and competitive spirit is a good thing up to a point, but
Yes.
it's something that you find very lacking in indigenous culture. They tend to be much more cooperative than competitive. And so I think that's why we need to get back in touch with that kind of indigenous perspective on how to run a society. The problem is it works very well for small groups. So indigenous societies are typically, maybe 100 people in a kind of a clan type setting, and beyond that, and you're not dealing with a vast world. So the question is, how can we take those tribal learnings and propagate them throughout society, where we feel a sense of responsibility to the greater good, to the public at large, to others, and we sympathize and have compassion for them.
In the movie, when obviously there's the warrior
Let us
who
now
really
turn to
to Avatar. I don't know. You might not. I want to tell you this. I was in Israel, and I was talking to some Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers, and I said, I'm telling you the truth. I said, well, the Great Mother doesn't choose sides. According to Avatar, the Great Mother doesn't choose sides. She's there to protect balance.
Yes.
She doesn't pick a winner. She protects balance. And do you
Yes.
know what the Palestinian and the Israelis in the room, do you know their reaction?
What they say. They thought about it.
They
That's
nodded.
good.
And I think it was because some of them had seen Avatar.
Yeah, maybe.
So
they,
I think
they knew
people-
the reference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Course in Miracles says God does not give you victory in battle. God lifts you above the battlefield. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to go to about the Amatakaya and the
Tell
and
that to the
movie,
Tell that to the Philistines. They got their ass kicked.
They sure did. So in the movie, there is a cooperative spirit, and I don't, for me personally, because of my spiritual perspective, you have so many amazing scenes where the whole group of them
Right.
are in harmony. When
They
they're healing,
synchronize.
the whole,
Yep.
absolutely. You show a
Yep.
lot of that in the
Yep.
film. But I thought it was also interesting, this sort of yin and yang, because there's the divine masculine as well as the divine feminine.
Exactly.
And it's the two working. So there's a point where Natiri definitely doesn't want to help the stupid Jake Sully. But
Yes.
her mother, the shaman, says you must.
Yeah.
So it has its top down. It
Yeah.
has leadership too. It does have a place where someone gets to make the call. So
Sure.
like when you're directing a film, so you are holding the space for the genius of all these people on your team, but then
That's a
you
great
do
way
get
to
make
put
the
it.
call.
That's a great way to put it. When I'm standing on the floor and we're shooting a scene, all of those designers and all of those artists all can't be there to speak, like the Greek chorus. So, but I've been in all those design meetings and I know the thinking behind everything. So I speak for that group, and I think that's a great way to put it. And Moat, the shaman, the female power, she's really speaking for the higher power that she is the representative of. And the thing about Avatar is that it's aspirational in the sense it's the way we wish it was. It's the way we wish we were. It's the way we think we might have been once and have lost touch with. So it's not about it's not a sort of intellectual exercise for what an alien civilization might be like somewhere else in the galaxy. It's really about us. That's why they look like us and they talk like us and they emote the way we do, because it's really about looking at a kind of idealized version of ourselves that are beautiful, that are in harmony with their world, that are strong, that fight when they need to for the things that are important to fight for, and don't fight when they don't need to, and try to avoid conflict when they can, as opposed to most action heroes that just fight first as a just way to solve everything.
It seems to me the spiritual message that I receive from a film like that is not just that it's the way we wish we could be, but the way we essentially are.
Yes.
The
Yes.
way we essentially are. And
Yes.
that's what the indigenous people have demonstrated and can
But we've
can
lost
teach
touch.
to us.
But we've lost touch with it. And we
We've lost
also
what's called
don't credit that in ourselves. And that's why I really urge you to read this book. I mean, you've written many books, and I'm sure that you'll see connectivity
I've heard
with
of
a
that
lot
book.
of your
I want to. Yes.
own themes. It's a very well presented case that basically says this is who we really are. And I
That's
take
what
it.
religion says.
Yes, exactly. This is who we really are and who we really want to be at heart.
I read a book once, I think it was called The Paradise Myth, and it said that there is no religious or spiritual tradition, there's never been a people, there's never been a tradition that hasn't had some form of a paradise myth. It's
Yeah.
what the Course in Miracles says is a melody we cannot completely lose.
Yeah.
We cannot completely lose the melody, and it's what makes us feel like we're aliens on this earth, because we are the aliens. It's like the people who come to Pandora. Pandora is the real world. Yeah. And we're all acting like Parker Selfridge and Colonel Quaritch, or however you pronounce it. I feel embarrassed pronouncing these things in front of you.
Good.
Like,
that's good.
No.
Very good. Full marks so far.
And Pandora is the real world. Well, I thank you so much for this conversation. I just want I don't want to abuse this opportunity, and I want to make sure that I have a couple of things to ask you, because you have said that you fear dark ages, but then, and you have said that we're not being the people that we are meant to be, and I think all of that is obvious in the film, and I think we've talked about it here. But the very fact that you're making the sequels says to me you must have hope.
I do have hope, and I have hope because of I think the financial success of the first film, one, was not a fluke. Second, is a good metric of the degree to which it actually inspired people across all cultures, because Avatar was the #1 film in basically every country. So if you can have a message that is transcultural like that, then it's important, and it's universally human. So when I sat down to write the sequels, because I knew there were going to be 3 at the time was the plan, it's eventually turned into 4. I put together a group of writers, and I said, all right, I don't want to hear anybody's new ideas or anybody's pitches until we have spent some time figuring out what worked in the first film, what connected, and why it worked. And so, and they kept wanting to talk about the new stories. I said, we're not doing that yet. And so I eventually had to threaten to fire them all because they were doing what writers do, which is try to create new stories. I said, we need to understand what the connection was. We need to understand that. We need to protect that ember, or that flame. So finally they got around, and we watched the film again, and we talked for about 2 or 3 days. And what emerged was that there was the surface kind of storyline, which is just plot. And there was a second tier to it that worked thematically. So it was the spiritualism, it was these themes of capitalism and imperialism and colonialism and human rights abuses and nature deficit disorder and all that. That all worked at the secondary level. But there was a tertiary level as well. And it was that, and we were all in unison once we talked about it, that there was a level that was dreamlike, that you couldn't really express in a sentence. It was not about this. It's not about colonialism. It's not about feminism. It didn't have any isms to it. It was just a dreamlike sense of a yearning to be there, experiencing that thing, being there in a place that was safe and where you wanted to be. And whether that was flying, that sense of freedom, that sense of exhilaration, accomplishment, whether it was being in the forest where you could practically smell the earth. It was a sensory thing that communicated on such a deep level that, to me, that was the true kind of spirituality of the film, was just that yearning that you can't give a voice to. And we actually created and rejected many storylines for the second and third film because they didn't take us to that transportive, dreaming with your eyes wide open, aspirational feeling. And whatever you want to call that, Carl Sagan called it what did he call it? The numismus or something like that. The numinous. The numinous.
Which is going back to the essential self. It's not new. It's going back. That's why Jesus is called the Alpha and the Omega.
Exactly.
It's because it's beyond time. That's is right. The religious experience.
Yes.
That is what the religious experience is, religio. Yeah. And to bind back to that which is essentially true. Yes. When you said this, you were speaking about the ocean. But I want to know if you feel it about all of life. You said what amazes you is life's capacity to adapt.
Yes.
So is the question becomes, on a level of civilization, will we be able to adapt to the great evil that is upon us? Will what I got from the Tarek Maktoum, once again a little embarrassed saying these words in front of you, isn't it a collective? Isn't Tarek Maktoum, isn't the Messiah at this point the collective of Jake
Yes.
Sully's? Isn't
Yes.
yes.
Yes, exactly. First of all, he was a blue collar guy. So what the film is saying at the thematic level is that the individual, no matter how dismissed by society or by power structures, is the most important. And we all, as individuals, have a voice and have a role to play. And when we accept that responsibility and celebrate it, and celebrate that you have something that you can do and must do, I think that because what a lot of people are suffering from is this free-floating anxiety around feeling that they don't have a sense of purpose. And they may overly define their purpose as, oh, well, I have to put a roof over my kids, or I have to take care of my mom, or whatever it is. People create proximal purposes to fill their time and fill their hours and keep one foot stepping in front of the other. But we all have a greater purpose and a greater duty to each other and to this world. And if we just embrace that, I think there's a joyfulness in that. And it changes everything. It changes the way you look at everything.
And that is the spiritual perspective, and that's what the Na'vi demonstrate.
Right.
Her father's message to her was protect the people.
Yeah.
She can't have a purpose that is separate from her relationship to the people.
That's
so
correct.
that ultimately what was so beautiful about the film was not just the relationship to the planet, but also the relationship to the people.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for having this conversation with me. The religious perspective, the ultimate of whether it's resurrection, redemption, and it's interesting, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, I don't know how much of him you have read, but he said, when I was younger, I was most impressed by smart people. The older I get, the more impressed I am by kind people.
Yes, exactly.
Are you learning things from getting older? Do you think that there are messages and understandings that you have now that, obviously we have more accumulated experience and with that comes wisdom, but is there something about age specifically that you think teaches you something?
I think what age brings is the sort of the certainty of mortality, and you start to question, well, what am I here for, and what have I been here for? And what when I look back on accomplishments, the things that I think of as successful aren't necessarily the things other people looking into sort of my fishbowl world from the outside would say that I would be the most proud of. I might be more proud of a crew that we had a particular relationship with on a particular expedition that made a film that didn't make money that nobody saw than I am of some of the high profile things that people would know. So I think there's wisdom in that. And I think there's, look, I still have a bad day from time to time on the set, but I think I'm a much mellower person and much more involved with my crew and in trying to bring acts of kindness during the day than I ever was back in my early days, because I was much more of a sort of a capitalist at the time, meaning I was there to compete, and the film was the product, and that became the sort of God that we all served, and it's a very corporate mentality. And I now don't think the film is the most important thing in my life. Far from it. I think the ideas expressed in the film are important, and it'd be great if we got it done, and it'd be great if people went to see it. But the most important thing is how you comport yourself and what you do and how you spend your time day to day. I think it's that as you approach your own mortality, and I just lost my younger brother, 14 years my junior, a few months ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My deepest condolences.
Well, thank you for that. And I don't mention it to sort of try to attract sympathy or anything, but just because it's that reality check that none of us know what our time on this planet is, and so every day should be embraced as an opportunity to do something kind for other people around you, because ultimately your existence is just ripples moving across this great pond. And eventually it attenuates out to nothing, kind of through time. 1,000 years from now, nobody's going to remember us, very unlikely. But we ripple through. They may remember somebody that we have remotely influenced, or that we've influenced somebody that influenced that person. So we create a continuum of ourselves and our principles and our ideas and our whatever it is, joyful spirit of life, we create that continuum with everything we do, not just the things that other people tell us are good accomplishments. Oh, you made money, you made a hit film, all of those things.
Well, society has more of a habit of how to tear people down than how to really celebrate our geniuses and fully appreciate them beyond their financial or commercial success. But clearly you have taken us with you on your evolutionary journey, including how you talk about working with teams, working with a set, etc.
Yeah.
You know, from the spiritual perspective, the religious spiritual traditions would say that Jake Sully was inevitable. That spirit made sure Jake Sully would be there.
Right. He is a manifestation. He filled a vacuum of necessity, and it just happened.
And
the other
thing, the thing I love also is that in the final battle, the Ekrons came from the sky. They were defeated from the sky. They were defeated from the sky. Exactly. So let me ask you this question. I keep saying, could I just ask one more question? Obviously, you worked with a lot of scientists and aeronautic engineers. But obviously a lot on Pandora was also fantastical.
Right.
Do you think that one day planes will fly with circular wings like that?
Yeah.
Or is that just fantasy?
Yeah, we have them now. They're called helicopters.
Well, that's true too. Jim Cameron, I cannot thank you enough. I will ask you, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received from anyone?
Well, Roger Corman, the famous B-movie director, when he knew I wanted, when I was doing my first directing for him, he said, sit down a lot. And it sounds kind of dumb, but what he meant was it's a marathon and you have to harbor your energy for the finish. And there's only one person that can do it.
Wow.
And so you've got to protect yourself. Is what he was saying. Protect yourself. Don't let the project tear you apart. At least that's what I interpret that he meant by that. But I think, if people have asked me for advice, like a deep ocean explorer was going to a place and had built a sub and was doing something similar to me. And he said, what do you advise? And I said, stop, take a moment in the middle of all the technology and the checklists and all the things you're doing, to just stop and be present. Stop and smell the roses, but stop and bear witness and be present and just feel the moment. And don't stampede through it and get back up to the ship later and run the whole thing through your mind and feel like something was missing.
A great teacher of mine was Stanley Crouch, the writer and jazz philosopher. And he said to me, observe more.
Yeah.
Observe more.
Yeah. Talk less and listen more. I have to remind myself.
Well, you take in a lot, obviously, because if you didn't take it in so much, you wouldn't be able to alchemize it and deliver it to us the way you do. I thank you so much. I thank you for what your films have given. I thank you for what Avatar has given me personally. I hope that you never doubt. I can't imagine what it's like for your wife. Does she ever say? She probably doesn't want to say, "Did you have any dreams last night, dear?"
She lives in a very rich dream world herself, and she's been known to have prophetic dreams. And there's pretty solid, and and they're of a very different character than her run-of-the-mill dreams. And so she knows when she's having one and when she's had one. And she's read all your books, and she's read, Eckhart Tolle's works and that sort of thing. So she's probably much more knowledgeable and more spiritually aligned than I am, at least in the sort of the literature of it. So she knows that we both have a kind of rich dreamscape that kind of enriches our waking life.
Well, I would not expect the universe to send you a partner of any less depth and perspicacity. God bless you, Jim. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and never, ever doubt about the changes being made by that movie in the minds and the hearts of people. I can certainly tell you it made changes in mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been really delightful. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
So that was my interview with the amazing James Cameron. I can't imagine that you didn't feel as I did at certain points, like, I can't believe I'm listening to Jim Cameron talk about this or that. What an extraordinary film director, obviously, but what an extraordinary human being. And we didn't get a chance to talk about the whales, but he is even now working on a documentary where they talk about how whales have community and how they basically teach their young about the culture that has gone before them and all kinds of things, where Jim Cameron is not only transmitting these amazing truths within the fantastical universes of his movies, but also within very nonfiction, National Geographic, exploratory documentaries where he's explaining things to us about the world that we live in right here, right now, that I think are one of the greatest contributions to the planet at this time. Truly an honor to have had him on the podcast. All right, now we're going to ask Marianne. If you have any questions, you can write to me at marianne@castmedia.com. Got some really good ones this week. We only have time to take one because the interview was kind of long, but who's gonna, take any less time than you can get with Jim Cameron? But this is from someone named Jeremy. Greetings, Marianne. I wanted to start my email by thanking you for running for president. The ripple effect of the media's coverage of you continues. Many may call your campaign far-reaching or naive, but if you hadn't run, there are many people, including myself, who never would have heard about your work. I recently finished A Return to Love. I do not consider myself religious, and I barely consider myself spiritual, but your ability to extract universal spiritual principles and address their symbolic importance makes spirituality accessible for a person like me. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's so interesting to me, this whole thing of the idea that we need to be, as Jim Cameron was talking about today, kinder, more collaborative, more loving, more empathetic. Some people call that naive. I think what's naive is to think we're going to survive another 100 years on this planet if we don't at least try. So I'm going to not be losing the love and empathy part of my message in anything I do for the rest of my life. So, Jeremy continues, I studied medical anthropology and public health in my undergrad, and I've been working for a state health department in COVID response for the last year. It has been a tumultuous year, and I've been grateful for the opportunity to do the work I have been doing. But to be honest, the work we do has felt hopeless, especially as of late. We approach this virus clinically. We learn how it spreads. We learn how to trace it. But this virus's success is not due to its communicability alone. It's due to our cultural conditions that have helped it thrive. This virus is intelligent. It has found the cracks in our cultural armor, and it has focused on them. 450,000 dead, and there are still those who would not bat an eye or take it seriously. This is an aberration that has extended beyond mere health care. We have taught entire populations not to care for their neighbor. This is the virus's power. My question is, where do we start if we want to heal these cultural cracks? Do we focus on education, spiritual principles, health policy, community development? I know our government well enough to know that if they had to choose, they would choose one of the options above, but never all of them. The implications of this virus are very serious. Any caring observer can see that, but I still have no faith in our government to take these implications seriously. Perhaps this has turned into a rant more so than a question. I apologize for that. I am conscious of my own ability to do more, but any energy I place into government feels horribly misplaced. I know this is an impossible question for one person to answer, and if we had a clear answer, the problem we are experiencing may not exist. But your thoughts always bring light to seemingly impossible situations. I know I'm not alone in my cynicism. How do we push back against it? How do we begin the cultural repair? Thank you, Marianne. You are significant. Sincerely, Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. Your letter is so gracious and loving towards me, but also very significant in terms of the message that you are giving through your question. And of course, it relates in a very big way to my interview with Jim Cameron. It relates in a big way to the message of Avatar. It relates in a big way to this aspirational yearning that so many people are feeling today, knowing that we must turn around. We have a whole systems breakdown. We must have a whole systems response. We have in society, we have in culture, much like we have in the body, an immune system. And each and every one of us have to now think of ourselves as an immune system in the body politic. Each of us has to do what we can. Do what you can. You obviously work in a field having to do with an intelligent, scientific uh, uh, understanding of the virus itself. That's a very important part of it. Wearing a mask is an important part of it. Social distancing is an important part of it. Respecting quarantine is an important part of it. All of the things that we can do, including recognizing that partly what happened here is what happens when you elect a government that does not see advocacy for the safety and the health and the well-being of people as its primary job. Now, I do think we have a president now who sees it very differently. I think you can feel the way the Biden administration is definitely trying to handle COVID from a more scientifically based, much more socially, ethically responsible place. But of course, they started out very behind because of how much damage had already been done. When President Biden talks about building back better, we have to take this very, very seriously. And part of building back better is that we as citizens must be much more responsible. We have been habitually distracted. Things could not have gotten as bad as they've gotten had too many of us just been living our own individual lives without thinking enough about what was happening to people around us. On the other side of town, on the other side of the world, we weren't thinking enough about what the government was doing. Oh, they'll handle it. We just checked in every 2 years, every 4 years, while major corporate lobbyists are checking in almost every hour of every workday. So one of the things, once again, going back to Avatar, the idea of living in subservience and in deference and obedience to the own higher vision within your own heart. That's how we are going to get through this. Every cell is guided to the way it can best collaborate with other cells. That's how the body works. And we talked in my interview with Jim about what happens when the cell disconnects from its collaborative intelligence. You obviously are feeling exactly what I was talking to Jim Cameron about, the pain of knowing it could be good on this planet. It could be beautiful. And what have we done? We're going to close that gap, though. And the reason I feel we're going to close that gap is because of people like yourself. It's because of people like Jim Cameron. It's because of leaders that are propping up in every field, including business, including politics, including health, including education, including relationships, including medicine. The two phenomena occurring at the same time. You have the death and the disintegration of one world that clearly isn't working. And at the same time, we're not just in the death throes of one world that's not working, we're also in a birth pattern, in a regenerative pattern. The only issue is time. Will we move fast enough? Also, meditation and prayer, the Course in Miracles says miracles collapse time. When you meditate, when you pray, just like in the movie, they go to the Tree of Souls where prayers are said and prayers are sometimes answered. Each of us have that inner being. And I do believe that as Jim was asking in one of the interviews, and I brought it up with him where he says nature adapts. I do believe we have a fighting chance. We have a loving chance. If we're all a little more loving, a little kinder, show up a little bit more and do what we can every day, I do believe we're going to save this beautiful, beautiful world. Generations after us will definitely remember us. They will either remember us and think, wow, in the final analysis, they showed up in time. Or they will look at us and think, what were they thinking? It's up to us. It's our choice. But don't think you're alone, Jeremy. That's what gives me hope. We are not alone. And as long as there are geniuses on the planet like the Jim Camerons and the regular jarheads like the rest of us, I do believe we're going to have the miracle that we're all looking for. Thank you so much. And don't forget, if you enjoy the podcast, I hope that you will rate it and review it on iTunes and check us out on YouTube. I want to remind you to write to me at Marianne@castmedia.com if you want. And also, thank you to Lauren Selsky, Wendy Zoller, Amanda Elliott, Austin Kendrick, and everybody at Cast. And more than anything, thank you. Thank you for listening. Wonderful, wonderful to have the opportunity to be with you with this podcast. And I look forward to seeing you next week.